Isolation protocol day 87, sort of ish. Yeah, right. Hi, I'm Kelly. This is going to be published on Thursday, but I am recording it yesterday, Wednesday, when I recorded the other one, which is why I'm wearing the same outfit. I did, however, make the scrunchie in the meantime out of that silk yarn from Darn Good Yarn. Such a joy to work with this yarn. I am recording this just to do a reading because I'm not planning on doing anything today or tomorrow other than, laundry. Okay, so this scene takes place after the scene in which Reese is looking for the librarian who tells her that the library is closed. So he takes her to Mr. Field's classroom. This is fairly early in the book, uh, page 41. So about 10%, well, about 15% through. Um, she is she is now in with the geek gang and in with Tishka pretty good. Tishka has invited her to a dance class and that kind of stuff, and the rest of Tishka's posse is not happy about it. So anyhow, now Reese is going into Mr. Field's so-called homework club, uh, and she's still a little unnervous about how Mr. Fields stares at her all the time with his just with those green eyes that she swears look directly into her soul. So here goes. Miss Reese shivered when she heard Mr. Fields' voice invite her in. There was something about him that didn't feel right. The librarian took Reese by the hand and dragged her into the room. As she stepped out from behind the librarian, she looked at the math teacher. She met his eyes for a moment. His smile lit up his face. Or maybe it feels too right, she thought, puzzled. She quickly pulled her eyes away from him and looked around the room. Reese's first impression was that she was looking at some kind of strange painting. Mr. Fields was sitting cross-legged on top of his desk. Others were perched on top of desks, on the back of chairs. One girl was even sitting on the windowsill. Their faces were perfect, like china dolls, and like dolls, expressionless. No, not expressionless, just unmoving. A few of them looked at her with curiosity, and the rest seemed to just be waiting for something. Mr. Fields rose impossibly gracefully and leapt from his desk. Reese could have sworn he landed soundlessly, but the pounding in her ears probably drowned out any noise that he might have made. Miss Zila. Miss Zila, welcome. I keep forgetting that I changed the pronunciation of her name to fit with the grammar that I have come up with for their language. Miss Zila, welcome. He quickly introduced the other students. Reese tried to remember their names, but was so distracted by his smooth voice, she really only heard the last few. That's Albert and Dale, and over by the window, the twins, Honey and Poppy. Reese crossed the room and took a seat on the windowsill near Honey, as far as she could from Mr. Field's desks. Leanth Duclana, Dale asked something that tickled a memory, but otherwise just sounded like gibberish. Reese frowned. For a moment of silence, during which she could fall out the window, Mr. Fields spoke softly. Or she wished she could fall out the window. Mr. Fields spoke softly. I don't think she speaks, Welsh, Dale. What does that mean? Dale smiled. Oh, just something we say when we meet someone for the first time. Honey peeked over the top of the book she was reading. Technically, it means, what is your clan affiliation? But really, it's kind of like just saying, how are you? I mean, really, no one really wants to know. She glared at Dale. Reese nodded, but Honey just kept talking. And, really, you know, most of what people say is just saying stuff because they don't want to not say nothing. Stuff like, I don't know, nice weather we're having, that kind of thing. Honey's twin, Poppy, rolled her eyes. Oh, for goodness sakes, Honey, just shut it. Honey went back to her book after glaring at her twin. From the look of the cover, it was a lurid romance. Rhys wondered how she could be reading stuff like that on campus. But as she looked around, no one else was actually doing homework, although she thought this was called the homework club. Al and Dale looked like they were making a drum. One girl was dancing with headphones on. A couple others were playing some weird card game and Poppy was just staring out the window. Mr. Fields had returned to his cross-legged perch on top of his desk and was correcting math papers. Reese remembered it was Friday. She didn't have any homework to do either. She pulled her notebook out of her huge purse and began sketching the others. She started with Honey, with her nose in the book, and Poppy with her feet propped up on a desk, staring out the window with a dreamy look. Next were Al and Dale, stretching a piece of leather over a carved wooden drum. She began to draw the girl who was dancing, and then she realized that they all looked fairly alike. Not in hair color, for the twins had flame red hair, Al was pale blonde, and Dale had dark hair, but they all looked far too young and small. In addition to their perfect China doll skin, they all had small, fine features. She knew Albert and Dale were seniors, but they could easily have passed for freshmen. The twins were in her class, juniors, although she hadn't met them before or been introduced. Still, they looked no older than 10 or 11. She remembered someone saying that Mr. Fields had been teaching for several years, but he didn't look any older than any of the high school students. She lowered her head and looked at him under her hood. He had the same fine, delicate features and graceful way of moving that all the others in the room had. She continued her sketch, adding Mr. Fields to the page, and she filled in all the blank spaces with twining vines, butterflies, flowers. She didn't know why, but she added dragonflies near Dale. Maybe he just seemed like a dragonfly kind of guy, she thought. She was debating starting a second drawing when Poppy straightened up. "Ride's here!" The grin on her face just lit her face up. Reese was not surprised when they all gathered up their things and headed out, as silently as Mr. Fields had leapt from his desk. In seconds, she was alone in the classroom with him. Alone. Together. With those green eyes. She felt the usual panic starting up. Just breathe, she reminded herself. He'll probably ask you to leave anyway. You may stay as long as you wish, Miss Zila. Or not. Thanks, Mr. Fields. The silence wore on, with only the scratching of her pencil as she added more details to her sketch. The odd-shaped hexagon nails the guys had used on the drum head, the flowers that the twins wore in their hair, the cover of the book that Honey had been reading. When she couldn't possibly add any more, she heard a chuckle. How long did it take you to do this? Reese looked across the room, and Mr. Fields was holding up her math test. I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes? Really? This is amazing detail. 6 minutes? Reese blushed. He was looking at the doodle she had made on the back of the test. Oh no, that took about 30 minutes. It was the test that took 5 or 6. He turned the test back over. Really? You got every single question right. Here, try this one. Her heart fluttered as she watched him gracefully navigate the tangle of desks and chairs to hand her a paper. Another test? He winked, making Reese tremble. This one should be a little harder. I'll give you 7 minutes. Unless you have to go? He tilted his head in challenge. She took the paper. I'm not good under pressure. Immediately she snapped her mouth shut. That sounded far too much like she was flirting with him, at least to her ear. Teacher, she reminded herself, although she really kind of wanted to flirt. Whoa, not like her at all. Reese closed the notebook and set it on the windowsill. It took all her willpower to keep from running from the room, to just sit at the desk. She tried concentrating on the paper instead of the beautiful man standing just inches from her. Teacher, she thought. Don't think of him as a man. He's a teacher. She looked at the paper. Question 1. Graph the equation. She looked at it. I haven't studied parabolas yet, she complained. Ah, but you knew it was a parabola. The challenging tone was there. Trying to shrink until she was invisible, but she had the feeling those incredibly green eyes would still find her. So, with a shuddering breath, she realized she did want him to find her. After a moment of silence, with only the ticking of the big clock on the wall and the pounding in her ears, Rhys grabbed her big purse. I should go. Amarisa, please, forgive me. It's okay. Oops, I lost a page. Oh, sorry, I lost a page. Okay, so Rhys accepted the challenge. The graph was done. She went on to the next problem. Solve the quadratic equation for x. Easily done. Next question. She finished and handed the test back before she glanced at the clock. Almost 10 minutes, the math teacher said, as if he could read her mind. Sorry. Mr. Field sat at the desk next to her and looked her straight in the eye. His playful look was gone. Never feel like you have to apologize to me. That was the final exam from last year's class. Most people took the full hour, and several didn't even finish. Only one person got the full 100% correct. Well, I just guessed at them. I don't think I did well. She looked at her hands tightly clutching the pencil as if her life depended on it. Reese forced herself to relax. She didn't want to break one of her precious pencils. Mr. Field spoke softly as if he knew she wanted to run. Reese? She stiffened. Slowly, he reached out to touch her wrist. Marisa, look at me. She didn't want to. Her back felt itchy. She tried to pull her arm away from him, but she couldn't move a muscle, except her head. She raised her head, trying to keep her eyes averted, but, like steel to a very powerful magnet, her eyes soon locked onto his. She started shaking as she tried to fight it. A small sob escaped, and Mr. Fields jumped away. I'm sorry, Reese, so sorry. He backed away through the jungle of desks and chairs, knocking over a desk in his haste. It never hit the ground. He caught it and righted it as he passed. It wasn't until he was behind his big wooden desk that Reese could pull her eyes from him. She clutched the pencil again to her chest, trying to shrink until she was invisible. But she had the feeling that those incredibly green eyes of hers would still find her, and she kind of wanted him to. With a shuddering breath, oh, wait a minute, what happened to that sentence? I think I deleted a sentence when I tried to switch pages. Uh, Reese grabbed her big purse. I should go. Amarisa, please. Forgive me, please? It's okay. Thanks for letting me stay here. She slipped out the door and raced down the hallway, hoping she would manage to speak the words out loud, but wanting to be gone before she could say anything more. So that was the end of chapter 7. And yeah, there's a really strange thing going on between Reese and Mr. Fields. And just as she's starting to feel somewhat less uncomfortable talking to students, she has to deal with him. So, yeah, that's when the things in the story start really going a little strange. And I'd like to know what you think about it. Again, remember that is an unedited version, obviously, because yeah, there's a lot of repeated words and phrases and stuff that I'm going to have to delete. And oops, I just changed it again. I keep doing side-by-side pages to vertical pages, and I don't know how I do that. There it is. Oop, nope, that's 3 pages. I don't want 3 pages. Okay, whatever. Anyhow, one of these days I'm going to learn how to work this program, but I would like to know what you think of it. So that is the second half of Chapter 7 from Girl Unseen. I have just a couple more chapters to clean up a little bit, fix some spelling, and then I'm going to send that off to my editor. She is quite busy right now, but she will get to it when she can. So I told her there's no rush on this. as I do have other things that I'm also working on. Uh, so whenever I get this back from her, I do need to start looking for a cover. So I'm also, if you know anybody who can do a cover, I've got part of a cover that I want to use, and I want to have that as being one of the layers on a much more detailed cover. So, yeah, if you know anybody who makes covers, let me know. We'll catch you later. Bye.